Mungkin saya remember on the one. I can hear you, Jerry, but I get nothing on the night.
In Kigali, she wakes up, she makes sad choice. In Hanoi, Natal, Ramallah, in Tangier, she takes a breath, lifts up her voice. In Lahore, La Paz, Kampala, though she's half a world away. Something in me wants to say, we are one woman, you cry and I hear you. We are one woman, you hurt and I hurt too. We are one woman, your hopes are mine, and we shall shine. In Wallace, she speaks the truth. She reaches out, then teaches others how to. In Jaipur, she gives her name. She lives without shame. In Manila, South Hamburg, though we're different as can be, we're connected, she with me. We are one woman, your courage keeps me strong. We are one woman, you sing, I sing along. We are one woman, your dreams are mine, and we shall shine. We shall shine.
And one man he hears her voice. One man he fights her fight. Day by day he lets go the old ways. One woman at a time. Though she's half a world away,
Something in me wants to say,
we are one woman. Your victory takes us all.
Welcome, everybody. I'm not sure if having COVID or hosting this first ever International Women's Day online event for Wanslea gives me more hot flushes, but I think we're all on, and I think everybody can hear me. If not, please drop a little message in the message box. But welcome, and especially a very, very warm welcome to the panel who are going to entertain us today. Before we begin, for those who don't know me, my name is Frances, and I'm incredibly honored to be your facilitator of this online event. So because it's online, we don't have to do any safety requirements. However, there are a few rules to this event. So as you can probably see, we have muted you and also have disabled your camera. This is just to make sure that the event runs smoothly and we don't have too many technical hiccups. However, we would really like your participation later on at the Q&A session. And to do that, we kindly ask you to put any messages or any questions you have in the message panel. You can access that via the chat function on top of your screen. I would also like to mention, as you can probably see on your screen, that this session will be recorded, so we can distribute it afterwards to everybody who could not attend this event. If you do have a problem with the recording, we ask you to leave the session now. It's my absolute privilege to hand you over to Robin, who would do a welcome to country. Robin, over to you.
I am one of many traditional owners and custodians of this land, and I'm truly honoured to welcome you to this webinar this afternoon. I would like to acknowledge with the highest respect Nyunga Mam and Ngunis, our men and brothers, and of course our very special guests, our Yorgas and Jukan, our women and sisters, and of course all of our Budias. We are all leaders in some way. Kaya. Wanju wanju nunakan kwaparak nunga buja, kerlak nunakan koring nija, wadran, borlu, marigarap, karagarap, double walilak, wadran, wajama, mandun, nija, karamurda, karagarap, borlu. All of these absolutely wonderful special places that are significant to Noongar people. Nunakan Jurpan, Ngan Kurt Waranka. My heart sings to welcome you today. Ngalakani Wankaning Bullabada. We listen to the many stories of this land. And of course, we are in the season of Bunuroo, the second summer, the hottest and driest part of the year. Ngalak Buja Ngani Nija Jenjang Buja Kundam Kura Kura. Our land feeds us, it nourishes our body and our spirit in the dreaming, now and in the future. We walk on sacred ground and renew our spirit and connect to country. Our women, their achievements, their voice, their unwavering passion give us strength and have empowered our past generations and paved the way for our future generations to come. Because of her, we can and we have. Yogas, Yuriyak and Murich. They are our mothers, our elders, our grandmothers, our aunties, our sisters, our daughters and our granddaughters. Wapwiran Kuling, Waranka, Nunakan Court Yokai Nija. Sing from your heart and celebrate together as one. Ngalak Ngan, Nija Murich, Jurpan Yogas, Ngank, Dembat Yok, Jinda Kalyakor. We celebrate together as women. And may your stars shine today, bright and in the future. Nija, break the bias. Kaya, Yunka. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. That was beautiful. So what if today is the day that we can stop pointing fingers? We can stop marginalizing each other. We can stop using rhetoric against each other just because of where we were born or because of our religion, of the gender identity, our sexual orientation, or of how our families are constructed. What would it look like if we start doing things completely different? What if there is another way? What would it look like if from today we could make space? Space for each other's truth, space for each other's anger, for our guilt, for our defensiveness, for our fear for the future, for our hope for the future. What would it look like if we make space for being courageous? What if we have the courage to have different conversations, to embrace that we first listen? We have to listen in ways that we show empathy rather than telling people how they should feel about their life. Sometimes this also means that we need to be silent, so we do not make it all about ourselves. We don't get to tell people about their reality. I also believe that we should have a mindset of curiosity. We should go beyond the mind of lived experience. What does it look like to look through the lens that other people share? What does it look like to listen to something that bothers and challenges you, and you ask yourself, where does this come from? Why do I think, why do I feel like this? To cultivate curiosity is to find a mentor that takes us to places that we haven't been before. Ask questions because none of us knows it all, and we need people on this journey to help us to get the answers to these questions. We must also negotiate our relationship with vulnerability. Our journey should never be about taking it the easy way. You will get frustrated, you get uncomfortable, but we are called to be gracious in this process. We should not be scared of sitting in a space of vulnerability. And what that means is that sometimes we have to speak up for what we stand for what is right, because we all belong to each other. And being silent in the face of discrimination and tragedy is deafening. We must redefine what it means to belong. We live in silos, detached from each other. We need to redefine belonging while connecting to our shared values of freedom and justice. How do we build a circle of belonging that encompasses humanity in a different way, that transcends differences, that transcends diversity, that transcends race? Because until we are able to do these things, we will not be able to tackle the problem of bias. So today, our speakers show us their way through sharing their story to showing courage and vulnerability, because continuous practice of small acts of courage, of sharing our stories, is the only way to interrupt bias. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Leanne. So Leanne joined Wanslea in 2018 as our Chief Financial Officer, but currently she is Wanslea's interim Chief Executive Officer. Leanne has worked in senior executive roles as a non-executive director within the not-for-profit sector for over 20 years and is passionate about organizational governance, leadership, and strategic planning. In the corporate world, Leanne is known for her business acumen that is complemented by her compassion, and I can vouch for that. Her ability to empower those around her always ensures results-driven achievements. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you, Frances. What a powerful introductory message. And thank you, Robin, for such a lovely, warm welcome. And I acknowledge and pay tribute to our elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everybody. Today, as we celebrate International Women's Day, I'm mindful that in many parts of the world, there are women suffering in war zones, in refugee camps, in various forms of slavery, poverty and disadvantage. Our hearts go out to women and their families caught in the Ukrainian conflict, our sisters enduring the floods on the east coast of Australia, and to women everywhere who experience violence, harassment or coercion. I am ever grateful to live safely and with good fortune for most of my life, and that is thanks to my family, privilege and a safe and supportive community. It could have been very different. I was born to a young, unmarried teenager and adopted by a mature, secure couple. For many in that situation, the outcome was dire, and for some it caused trauma that was passed down to their children. So I've been very fortunate. My working life started as an accountant, firstly in government, the tax office, no less, and then as a consultant for the large accounting firms. And as anyone who has been working since the 1970s and 80s will tell you, the workplace was very different back then. And the accounting profession was dominated by men in dark suits. And in some firms, they all came from the same schools, played in the same sporting teams, and excluded anyone who didn't fit that mould, who prioritised their family and or didn't toe the line. I'm very glad to say that that workplace has changed considerably since then and is far more inclusive and supportive. By far, the largest part of my career has been as a manager and leader in not-for-profit organisations, in education, health, and now in community services, where I have found my true purpose with organisations that are built for purpose. My very first job in management was at a large private girls' school, and the principal took me on as her risky candidate. Risky because I was young, female and new to management. But that job became the making of me as a manager. And that's because I had to get across a wide range of responsibilities, including people management, looking after property, fundraising, catering, and of course finance, all things apart from the finance that I hadn't learnt before, hadn't done before. I also led a team of women who were older and more experienced, and at least one of them thought she should have gotten the job over me. So that's where I learned that the only way to lead and influence in that environment is to respect the people you work with, their knowledge and experience, and to support and develop your team and to work hard and lead by example. I learned that there is so much more to each person than what they do at work each day, that each individual has challenges, history and aspirations, a story to tell, a story that I was very privileged to learn. I also learned that people blossom when you give them a challenge. You empower someone to solve a problem, or you trust them to take on greater responsibility. An investment in a person, whether by trusting them or by developing them, is nearly always rewarded. It has an impact on that person, on their colleagues with some inspiration, and on efficiency in the way the organisation operates. One thing that has changed considerably since those times was the need, the support that's available for parenthood. Back then, there was only unpaid parental leave and there was very little flexibility in terms of working hours. I do think that there have been attitudes and policies that have made it difficult for anyone to have a family and a career. And I never really tested that. I didn't take time out to have a family, and I can see the impact that it has for those that do. When women take their parental leave entitlement, the time taken is excluded from their continuity of service. The contributions to their superannuation cease, and for many, there is a setback to their career. And yet, women who return to work after their experience of their first 12 months of motherhood have gained in maturity, motivation, and for Wanslea, providing services in early childhood development and care, that experience in managing one or more toddlers is invaluable. We are now beginning to see improvements, and this is where we can really make a difference to ensure that we can keep our most talented team members, to engage them, to maintain their professional development and status, and to build on our support as a charity devoted to children and family. I have enjoyed support from my colleagues and mentorship from my CEOs, and what I take from that is the great importance of paying that forward. It is an absolute joy to be able to support and develop our people, to see them realise their greatest aspirations and to invest in their future, which in turn creates a very bright future for Wanslea, for our mission and for our community.
Thank you, Leanne. That was absolutely inspirational. I loved the paying it forward attitudes and the storytelling, the thinking outside the box, something that we can definitely learn from. Our next speaker is Robin. Robin joined Wanslea in 2018 as our cultural practice manager and was recently appointed Wanslea's general manager, cultural safety and partnerships. Robin is a proud Noongar woman, passionate about educating all Australians on the culture and history of the First Nations people, Aboriginal and Torres Islanders. Robin is an advocate for healing country and believes it is important to raise awareness for the atrocities Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people have been subjected to in order to reconcile, heal and live harmoniously. Robin is wise, warm, humbling, and her wealth of knowledge and calm approach to educating others is truly admirable. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you very much for that, Frances. It's so important to actually acknowledge where we are. And I would like to say, for me to share my story, it's actually also talking about some of my life experiences. And I can recall one of my former colleagues, David Cusack from the Northern Territory, always saying to me, "But Robin, you are a trailblazer. And I think, what on earth is he talking about? So let me go back. As a student at Little White Gum Valley Primary School in Fremantle there, we were the only Aboriginal family in that area at all. So whenever there was any issue with Aboriginal people, of course the police always used to come knocking on our door. It wasn't to take anybody away, but it was more, do you know who this is? Do you know where I can find them? So Mum and Dad were very much that sort of conduit to the wider Noongar community. But at Little White Gum Valley, being the only Aboriginal family, that was also sort of different, because it meant that we had to try and teach everybody different things, or that the curriculum that we had was only ever about the Aboriginal person standing on one knee, with the leg on the knee and then the spear in the hand. So it was always about challenging assumptions. And I learnt to be a very reflective observer, because I knew that people were going to be reacting differently to different things that would come up in our life. And coming, of course, from a family of 9, so there were all 11 of us squashed into this little 3-bedroom home. And then, of course, both Nana and Prop on either side of the family would come and stay with us for a little while. So it was just normal for us to have all of these people and kids around. Nothing was any different, but we made sure that everybody got fed. And on those days when there wasn't enough food, there would always be damper. There would always be flaps, which today is known as, your lamb ribs, but we used to always call them that. And they used to be cheap. They're not anymore. So just some of those things were very different. Going to South Fremantle High School, again, only us Noongars were there at the school. There was nobody else. Lots of Filipino, lots of Italian families who were similar in the way that we would share the meals and everything. So that was very special too, being at school. Okay, I finished year 10, got to year 11. We were the first year 11s to go through at South Fremantle High School. So I guess that's what David was sort of referring to about being a trailblazer. Of course, we get to year 12 and I'm still hanging in there, only one. And I knew of only one other person on the north side of the river who was doing year 11 and 12 at the same time as me, and her name was Sandra Harris. So there was only 2 of us at that time, back in the early 70s. I was lucky enough to complete my year 12 and get a really, really top TEE score, which is now TER, or whichever way it is, but your entrance to uni. So at least I had some options there. Now, I had nobody helping me at home to study, because Mum and Dad had only ever gone to year 3 and 4. So that was a bit different for me. Finished that, and I tried a few different things, going to the Institute of Technology, which is now Curtin University. But then I tried Edith Cowan, and of course we celebrate our first elected person as well, woman into politics. And I guess that was sort of different. I then, of course, fell in love, and how that messes everything up. And then I took time out to have 3 children. And in that space of time, my husband, who happened to be playing for South Fremantle here, was asked by Richmond to go and play in the VFL at the time, the Victorian Football League. So he came home from training one night and he said, okay, well, what do you want to do? It's up to you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, are we going to go over to Melbourne and live or not? I only ever had one uncle in Melbourne. But then I'm thinking, what are we going to do? We'll have to sell our house. The kids were still small. And I said, okay, let's do it, because I don't want you to say, I could have, I should have, I would have. So we went to Melbourne to live. So there's all these different things that we'd tried out. And we ended up staying there for 6 years in a place that I didn't know many people, but, I learnt to be resilient, find my way around. Luckily, Melbourne is just this big grid-like structure, and once you get on one road, the name changes, but you still get to the other place. So I learnt that quickly. So again, to be a Noongar wife of an AFL, that then became the AFL in this space of time, football player. So here I was going off to all these flash morning teas, afternoon teas, lunches, football games, not realising the enormity of it here 30 years ago. Again, David, the trailblazer. And then I guess I came back from there and I thought, hang on, what am I going to do if things don't work out? We'd come back here in the mid 80s, and I thought, I've got to get back to study, which I did. And I had 3 small children. But you know what? I did it. I struggled through it. What I did, I enrolled at Murdoch University, which was only 5 minutes away from home. So instead of travelling an hour each way, it was only 5 minutes. That meant that I had 2 extra hours of study per day. Children going to school, into kindy and preschool whilst I was studying. So that was tough. But you know what? I did it. Because remember, at that time, hubby was still playing football and training and still working full time. So I was sort of doing this on my own. I've been lucky enough to have some wonderful jobs, both in the Northern Territory, in the education department and with Catholic education up there, and to become a principal up on the Tiwi Islands, but then also to have those leadership roles down here in Perth. So I'm very conscious of opportunities. Yep. Trailblazers. Yes. And spending 15 years at Catholic Ed in that leadership management position and managing Aboriginal staff. And when I would go to people for assistance in HR, they had nothing to give me because they didn't have anything about managing Aboriginal staff. So I actually had to develop all of those assets and things that I could use to help. But, you know, and it hasn't been an easy journey. I just want to share one part of that journey when I was encouraged to do some postgraduate study when I was in that workplace. And I had enrolled and rocked up on the first day. And there were all of these other leaders, people who were working. And my upline manager at the time came up to me and said, "Oh, Robin, what are you doing here? You're not a part of the leadership course." I said, "No, but I'm enrolled in this unit at uni." "Oh, well, you better go and apply for annual leave then if you want to be a part of this." I was absolutely livid. My emotions got the better of me. And I will say this, a week later, I came down with an extreme case of Bell's palsy. Now, people can say, "Oh, no, it's a little bug." But I know why I got that. It was severe stress from me having to fight my way through so that I could have the same opportunity to study at the same time as my colleagues. And funnily enough, a majority of them were men who were given all of this space in the leadership. But, you know, there's so much more to it about having to fight, to ask, to find out. But you know what? I got around those barriers. I did it. And I also have given that to others. I've lost count of Indigenous people who I have mentored and encouraged to become teachers, both across the Northern Territory and here in WA, to become leaders, to have opportunities to study for their postgraduates, and they too now are leading. So whatever I have given, I hope that has grown 10, 20-fold for others to change their lives and to be leaders in whatever they choose to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Robin. That's a lot of food for thought. And always when I listen to you, it's just such an incredibly humbling, but also, you know, when we talk about vulnerability, it's a vulnerable experience because it's still unfortunate that there's so many things we should be ashamed of that are still happening. And I'm so happy that right now you do have a seat at the table. So you have influence and so well deserved. So thank you, Robin. Joe, over to you. So Joe joined Wanslea in 2019 as General Manager for the foster care team. Jo has worked within the community services sector for almost 20 years and is a mental health and well-being advocate for young people. Jo studied psychology and has an extensive experience within the child and youth support services, including being the chair of the Child and Family Alliance WA since 2020 and working for the Department of Child Protection directly for 5 years. Jo is a strong and driven individual who is passionate about helping others and improving outcomes for children and families. Thank you, Jo.
Thanks, Frances, and thanks for that welcome. I'm really quite honoured to be here today. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And thank you to Wanslea for the opportunity to speak on International Women's Day. So after being asked to speak, I thought about today, and I wanted to share my journey as a female leader. I wanted to share my insights, my learnings and reflections to inspire other women to reach their goals. So I'm hopeful some of what I talk about today will give you an indication of my journey, but also for women that are listening. Are there opportunities for you to go further and use sort of, as Robin so nicely put it, trailblazing or creating a path and letting other female leaders follow behind and create their own path. So as I thought about the theme for International Women's Day, Break the Bias, I thought deeply about whether bias had impacted on my career. And I think for me, what was a protective factor was the role modelling I received in my early years. And I do believe role modelling we receive in our early years has a significant impact on how women are valued in our society. I feel very lucky to be raised in a family that shared parenting duties. Both my mum and dad worked and contributed equally to the family through contribution of income and home duties. I didn't actually grow up with an understanding that there was defined male and female gender roles in that respect. Mum did, I guess, do the cooking in that sort of more traditional way, and dad did the gardening, but they both contributed equally and both worked. There was no daycare in those days, but you know, we just managed as a family and used our support networks to get by. And they saw that as important that both of them had a career. So this shaped my view of how men and women are equal. And men and women can support each other and lift each other up to be the best versions of ourselves. We don't need to make it all men or all women. We're both able to achieve, we're both able to use our different strengths to complement each other to achieve great things. I think for me, one of the most, one of the biggest challenges I had in my years was having a child at 25 and suddenly realizing that there was no support for being a stay-at-home mum. Very, very limited Centrelink benefits at the time, no sort of childcare benefits. And the reality was the work that I was doing at the time was never really going to sustain or contribute enough to help raise my daughter and contribute with my husband to creating a life for ourselves. So I started university when I was 30, and I started that when I just had my second child, so he was 3 months old. So I completed my Bachelor of Arts in Psych, my honours and an MBA throughout all of the years whilst working full-time and raising my children with my husband. So again, equality was in our household. We both shared all the duties, looking after the kids, you know, doing what we needed to do to ensure that we were both available to the children whilst I actively furthered what I could in terms of my career by focusing on my education. I'm proud of the example that I set to my son and my daughter. And I know we talk about raising our daughters, and that is important. So my daughter, she has seen me work, study, juggle, challenge, and she knows now that you can achieve anything you want as a woman. But for my son, I think I've also set a great example that he is a young man growing up in a world that he already sees women as equals. He already sees women as valued members of our society. I don't think he even understands that there is bias for women, because in our family, it's equal. In so many ways, I could have let inequality impact me, but I didn't. I always backed myself as the best person for the job, whichever job it was, not because I was female and not because I was not. Self-belief is powerful, and being clear on your purpose and how you want to impact the world can be achieved regardless of any barriers that may exist. But I also believe having a support network is critical for success. You do need to surround yourself with people that believe in you, people that support you, and with that, you will succeed. Unfortunately, like a lot of women, I have experienced bias in my career. And what saddens me most is the bias that I've experienced in my career is actually from other women. Women need to be supporting each other, not competing with each other. Early on in my career, I achieved a significant knockback where my probation period was extended in a role that I had desperately wanted. And, you know, I took it on board as the learnings for what it was. However, the rationale behind that was really to promote my line manager, who was a female, her best friend into a position. And I just feel that, you know, we can't tear other women down. We've got to support other women to achieve. And I've spent most of my career supporting and developing other women in my field who report to me. I want them to succeed as I have succeeded. So I guess reflections for me and reflections for other women, reflections for women that may be on their own journey. Believe in yourself. Surround yourself with people that believe in you and you will succeed. It's never too late. Women need to support women, and we will then experience equality for women across all elements of the globe. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute today.
Oh, Jo, thank you so much. And unfortunately, like you, I have seen women doing not so nice things to other women, and it saddens me on a lot of different levels. So thank you for raising that. And also thank you for raising the fact that there are so many amazing men out there who are our champions. And for me, International Women's Day is also a celebration of our champions, because we can't do it on our own. We can't bring change without including the men. And we are incredibly lucky to have an amazing person on our panel. Vishaan, welcome. Vishaan joined the board of Wanslea in 2021. He's a lawyer and he's passionate about the work that Wanslea does to cater for the young children and their families. Vishaan is also passionate about the impact that the law can have on human lives and the relationships. He believes that it's important for the disenfranchised members of our community to be empowered to develop their own voice and pursue opportunities they choose for themselves. Thank you, Vishaan.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis, for the introductory comments, and thank you for having me this afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge in my turn the traditional owners of the land we meet on, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Always was, always will be. Today in particular, I'd like to acknowledge the female elders past, present, and emerging, who continue to work tirelessly to make their voices heard, to make their bodies seen and be respected. I've reflected on what I would like to share with you, and I could not feel any more out of place having heard the stories that you've all shared about your personal experiences. And I've prepared some notes, but I've decided to park them and instead tell you about 3 women in my lives who have had a remarkable impact and who have shaped me to be where I am, and to whom I owe a great deal. So a little bit about me. I was born in Mauritius, which is a very small island off the east coast of Africa. I come from a line of Indian workers, and I use the term worker quite loosely. They were slaves. Back when Mauritius was a British colony, the British rulers took a boat to India, stacked the boat up with a group of people, hundreds of them, brought them to the island and offered them work. As a result, they became enslaved. The impact of that treatment, of that experience, has rippled through generations. It is what we now understand to be intergenerational trauma. Joe, I hear you talking about your upbringing and the examples you've set for your children. That is quite remarkable and will most definitely have long-lasting impacts on your children's development and the opportunities they have. I was born to a woman who was 22 years old at the time, my mum. She was married off to a man who, my father, at the age of 18, she had my brother when she was 20, she had me when she was 22. She comes from a household of deep, deep, complex trauma where domestic violence was a day-to-day proposition, where you may or may not have enough food to feed the family. Therefore, once you hit the age of 18, marrying you off was the only option. She did the best she could with the resources she had. She was married to a man who comes from a well-to-do background. But again, the man in question, my father, started working at the age of 5 in the fields to support the family because that's what children did. So fast forward to us, we come from a background where adults did the best they could with what they had. And if the best that my parents could do, my mum could do, was to love me and look after me and do that with the support of her mother, who again did the best she could, and the support of her mother-in-law, so my 2 grandmothers, I have a great deal of gratitude towards them. Because when I think and reflect on their lives, which I do quite often, I think about the challenges they've had to overcome to be able to bring children up, to have enough money to support us through life and allow us access to education, studies. You know, I come from a background where education was the only way out, was the only way to be able to get out of that environment. An environment that I've loved, because notwithstanding the tragedy of so many aspects of their lives, they were able to see the good in people. They came to the table with a degree of resilience, of humility and gratitude that is unparalleled. And when I reflect on the love that my mother nurtured, despite her day-to-day challenges, living in a world where she had no agency. We're now March 2022. My mother is a 57-year-old woman who does not have access to a bank account, who does not know how to withdraw money from a bank to support herself. She's forever reliant on the patriarchal system. In return, she supports her mother, who is in a similar situation. And in gratitude to her in-laws, she looks after her mother-in-law, who is an elderly woman. I see resilience. I see an appetite to take on a challenge and to do the best you can with the resources you have. So my reflections for today is that I owe so much of what I have to women in my life, personally and professionally. I did not just become a lawyer in private practice in Perth because I was good at it. I became who I am thanks to the hard work that others have put into me and for my betterment. And in terms of experiencing inequality through that lens, I am a product of the environment I grew up in. I'm constantly wondering, what on earth am I doing on International Women's Day, speaking to a group of people of such great intellect, listening to me? What on earth have I got to bring to the table? That is definitely as a result of the exposure I had at a young age, where you're forever questioning yourself. You're forever wondering, I'm going to get caught now any minute. I'm such a huge imposter. But there's that constant reminder of, well, those people who have worked tirelessly to get to where they are not imposters. And what I heard from Robin, Leanne, and Joe, having your own back, believing in yourself, and also being able to interrogate yourself, question your own sets of beliefs or views of the world, questioning your own biases is, I find, quite a fundamental aspect to achieving equality from my perspective. Not resting on my laurels and thinking, oh, my view of the world is correct. I could be incorrect. I can be challenged and should be interrogated with my beliefs. And that I found has helped me maintain a balanced view of my world and my experiences. I hope I haven't gone over time, but it would be great to hear what others have to say in questions. Over to you, Frances.
Well, Vishal, if you just questioned why you were here, then I think all of us can agree that you, well, you brought tears to my eyes. That was an amazing story of inspiration and such a great example of how strong women can be. And thank you for sharing that. We started off talking about, you know, how this day we can stop things, and I think you have done it for us. We definitely, you've stopped us to think about things differently, and you have an enormous courage of sharing this amazing story. So thank you. Thank you to all of the speakers. This was a very inspirational first, and I think that now that we have done this, this can be the first of many. So I would like to ask you to put in any questions you have, and we'll just help you ask those questions to the panel. Just to maybe start off, one of my questions was about role models, because I'm big on mentorship and role models, but you have kind of answered that question already. So maybe Leanne, if I can ask you, so when, you know, with the HR background, how do you think that we can be more open-minded and inclusive in our hiring practices?
That's a really good question. I think the way to achieve, I mean, you know, we put a statement out, we say that we're inclusive, but I think it comes down to our processes and how we go about assessing candidates, the way we advertise our positions. You know, it's all about removing barriers and exclusion, and making sure that, I love that phrase you use, be curious. We want to know more about the people that are interested in joining us. So I think we need to find ways to be curious, to find out about people, to find out what they have to offer, and it goes beyond what's on the page. You know, the written CV. I think you know, that great learning for me about understanding the people that you work with and learning their story. I mean, it's a great joy to hear the story. And so such an inspiration, Bashan, to hear your story and the story of your mother and her and the generations before her. And I think that's how we get to know people, is to find out what their story, what are their inspirations and what are they dealing with, and those sorts of things. So we've got to, I think we have to find ways to get that and to understand it, and make the recruitment process more open and allow that sort of engagement at that very early stage.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. And Vishan, maybe you can elaborate on that as well, especially coming from your law background. I've done a little bit of work with lawyers, and they all look a little alike. And so what are your suggestions to maybe be more open-minded and inclusive in our hiring process?
Certainly, I think what resonates with me from what Leanne just said is effectively having the right people, in the sense that as an organization, you will be recruiting with a value proposition. So what are your values as an organization, and putting that out there candidly, and also quite genuinely. We don't just formulate values just because it sounds cool, but they are values which go to the core of who we are as an organization and what we stand for. That in and of itself is quite impactful and will attract people with whom those values resonate. But in terms, I suppose, of the broader thinking, I think as a prospective employer or recruiter, is to be aware of the systems that have instilled biases and built frameworks which foster those biases and prejudices, and being aware of them in the sense that inequality is not an overnight product. It's a product of many years of foundational work that's been done, and foundations which have supported a system where we are at the very core of our brain ingrained with all sorts of prejudices or biases. We form a certain perception of a person from their very first presence without even them uttering a word. So being aware of all that and really instilling in our people the ability and aptitude to reflect on what messages their brains are sending to them, and whether or not these are correct, these are accurate. I think identifying the systems issues hopefully will then trickle down.
Yeah, thank you, Bishan. That's really, and you know, we talked about that curiosity. I always think it's like a leadership skill, and we're all leaders, to always question ourselves. And, you know, I say to my children, like, if someone is angry, like, they're not necessarily angry at you, but maybe be curious on where that anger is coming from, and rather than judge, have curiosity. And I think that we should include that in the way we do our recruitment. I was reading an article about like having resumes with no names on it. And they've done several surveys on having a resume, and they swap their names. So a female becomes a male and a male becomes a female. And it's what you're saying. There is a bias towards certain jobs that should be done by males. And while the female candidate is actually a better candidate. So yeah, really interesting. And I think one of the things that you all mentioned as well is like, I think education is so important, and it's that ongoing mindset of you want to grow, you want to better yourself, you want to challenge yourself. So yeah, thank you. The only reason why I'm still talking about these things is because nobody is asking any questions. So I have lots of questions, so I'm a bit disappointed to the community there. But anyway, Robin, one of the, like in your story, I mean, there could be so many times where you maybe decided not to be the trailblazer, but to give up, but you never gave up. Why?
That's not an easy one to answer, because there are so many times when I have stumbled and fallen, but somehow we get up off our knees. And I can recall one of those when I lost my daughter. And if I cry during this, it's okay, because that's a part of the healing. She self-harmed, and I truly lost my baby daughter, who was my best friend. And there were many people who couldn't understand my absolute grief. And so for 6 weeks in trying to get through that, I was at home. But there came a time when I just knew I had to get up and get back into the world of the living and go back to work. As I climbed those stairs at work, that you know, it was in a Georgian building, beautiful dark wood stairs, a little bit like Harry Potter, as my grandchildren would call it. I walked up and I could just feel the angst as I would get to my office. And then someone saw me and they said, with all good meaning. How are you, Robin? I absolutely looked in horror and I just kept walking. How could I answer that when I just lost everything that was special to me? And then someone else, when I went to get a cup of tea, oh, how are you, Robin? And in that moment, I knew that I had to do something. I went back to my desk and I emailed the director and I said, can you please send an email around to everybody in the office? When they see me, don't ask me how I am, but please say, it's good to see you back. Because then it's acknowledging the grief and coming back to work and making that transition happen, because you know how I felt. Why would I have to say that 100 times over to each and every person when I was living this grief and agony? So it's times like that. Some people might want to know part of the story, but then how do you share that without it become a burden to others? So it was a very fine balance. So I had a wonderful lady who I would talk to who had done all of her postgraduate studies in grief. And she would often say to me, Robin, your wisdom, you're acknowledging what you are going through, but you are still able to get up and come to work and function. So to me, that was one of those times when I could very easily have fallen and not gotten up. I did. But I have now 13 wonderful grandchildren with another one on the way. And how could I say anything to my children about that? But when she is due on your late daughter's birthday, what more of a gift could that be?
Mm.
So
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Looking at the time, unfortunately, I think we need to close. I think it's been an amazing experience. I think I couldn't have asked for a better panel. I mean, you have shared with love, with vulnerability, and you know, I think you have inspired all of us. Although I didn't get a lot of questions, I did get a lot of responses on how truly inspirational you have been. So I think I speak on behalf of everybody. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. This has been a really, truly amazing experience. I'm not sure if I have to thank the universe or technology, but we did it without any glitches. So thank you. And Lorraine, you've been amazing. You got 3 days to set this all up, and we had over 66 people attending this event. So it's been truly amazing, and it never seems to amaze me that, you know, people like Lorraine and Courtney and Sabrina just jumped to this occasion since early this morning. We've been testing things, so really appreciate your availability to this. All the participants, thank you for participating. I am so happy with this event because I've been trying to get lunch and learn happening online, and now we have proven that we can do it, so there's no more excuses. So again, all of you, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I would like to hand you over to Leanne for some final words. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Frances, thank you for putting this together, and I'm very appreciative for you and Lorraine and Sabrina and Courtney for all the work that you've done to put it together, and of course our wonderful panellists. Thank you, all of you, for agreeing to share, to be vulnerable, and to share such inspirational stories. It's been a real privilege to hear them. And I think, you know, we got some really great advice today. We've got some really amazing stories, and I think that I've got some here that I want to share, but there's a bit of a theme here. This is about speaking up, being brave, being curious. Thank you, Frances. Always be curious. Question the norm. Question what's going on. If it doesn't seem right, speak up. You know, because chances are you aren't the only one who's noticing this or is having a problem with it. So please speak up. And it's those small acts of courage, you know, when you speak up, when you change something, when you push against the barrier, that's what breaks bias and inequality and discrimination. So don't be scared to be a trailblazer like Robin. There are many great rewards from putting yourself out there. You can be resilient and don't limit yourself. It's never too late, as Jo tells us. You know, you can, there's so much that you can do, and you must believe in yourself. Absolutely believe in yourself. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, but keep fighting for those, for that opportunity and to keep going. Never give up, never surrender. Motto out of one of my favourite movies, Galaxy Quest. But it's a really good tagline. So that's how, I mean, and that's how we get around barriers, and that's how we inspire others to do the same. We teach and encourage others to do the same. And so I'm going to repeat what I've said too. You know, we're in leadership positions. We're in a position to inspire other people, other women, and you are in every role that you're in. You're always an inspiration. You lead by example in what you do, and you created a path for other women who follow the same path. We're all in it together. We're all here to support each other, and the more we can do to support and develop each other, the better it is for everybody. We've got some amazingly strong women around us on the panel and in our participants today. Thank you so much for joining us. I feel very, very lucky to be a part of this organisation and to be surrounded by such inspirational people at throughout Wanslea. You know, we're very lucky to have that level of support and terrific people to work with, all aimed at doing wonderful things for children and for families. So thank you, everybody, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.